This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com in review. If you recall 1977's The Car, it was a relatively simple movie. I believe it starred James Brolin, father of Josh Brolin, whose family is being plagued by this car that is driverless. Now, this was before driverless technology was even a suggestion. I mean, it was the most fantastical notion. And in the movie, the car was possessed, if you will. I haven't seen it in a long time. I don't recall how it happened, as in how the car was possessed. But I do recall enjoying that movie. There wasn't a lot to it. Car chases after family, family tries to evade car. That was essentially it. It wasn't complex, and that was fine. It suited the material quite well. Flash forward to 2019, where we have The Car, Road to Revenge, which is a sequel slash reboot of the 1977 movie. And oh my God, this movie has tax write-off written all over it. It's an odd movie, and I call it a tax write-off because I don't think you would have this movie made under any other circumstance. It's not that it's bad. It is quite bad, in fact. That's not the worst thing about it. There's some bad movies that are actually really, at least, interesting. This is, well, that's not fair. The Car, Road to Revenge is interesting. Interestingly bad. The Car, Road to Revenge is essentially The Crow, with some RoboCop mixed in. The movie stars Jamie Bamber. Well, for a little while it does anyway. He leaves relatively quick. And it surprised me to see him because, I don't know, there's something in my head that associated him with very high quality productions. This is the guy who played Apollo on the reboot of Battlestar Galactica. He just seems very classy to me. And he elevates this Drek a little, but not nearly enough to get off the ground. And that's a pity. But in any case, he plays this district attorney of some unknown American city. I'm 100% sure this movie is not filmed in America. No way. But in any case, he's doing an American accent, and supposedly this is in America. It has very RoboCop-ish vibes. It's taking place in some kind of indeterminate future, a future where they're driving, well, hold on. I was going to say he was driving a Chrysler 300, but that's not really fair. In the movie, he's driving a car called a Lazarus something or another. Now, keep in mind, Lazarus rose from the dead. Subtle much? So in any case, he is killed. He's thrown from a high building, lands on his car, he dies. Somehow, he possesses his car. Now, keep in mind something. If this were a better movie, I would care less about how that event actually happened. I mentioned a 1977 movie earlier, and sure, I would like to know how the car was possessed by a demon or whatever. It would be good to know. But if your movie is engaging enough, like the original The Car was, I want to say Le Car so bad, like the original The Car was, it didn't really bother me not to know it, because the narrative was pretty interesting. It was well, for the most part, well acted, and it caught me at a time such things really interested me. With this movie, everything is bad. And I don't mean that as a criticism of the probably hundreds of people who had a hand in making this movie. Everyone was just doing their part. They're not at the helm. They didn't write it. They didn't direct it. It's just, oh, it's so bad. For instance, as I mentioned earlier, this takes place in an unnamed American city. It's sort of futuristic, but not really. You can tell it's not supposed to take place in the current time, but nothing looks advanced enough to point to a more futuristic time. If you recall RoboCop, again, this movie steals so much from RoboCop, the cars and vehicles looked a bit more futuristic, not hugely, but it looked like it could exist in a future not very far from our own. With The Car, Road to Revenge, you can't tell when it's supposed to be happening. It looks like now, except it's kind of grungy And you could tell they were trying for a futuristic type look. It doesn't work, but they were trying. There's lots of talk about microchips and this, that, and the other. So that was a goal which it fails at. Another way this movie doesn't work is in the locations. It starts out in a city, and it has this set of a few city streets. How do I know it's a set? Because it's fairly obvious it's a set. There's something about the way this set is lit that it looks like a set. It looks very fake. That's not to say you can't do these things right, or at the very least better. If you recall the Tim Burton Batman movies, a lot of those took place on a set, a soundstage. Well, the city streets, that type of stuff. They weren't actual streets. And they looked fine. They didn't necessarily look real, but they didn't look bad either. The street that's in this movie looks fake and not very good. That's one issue. Another issue is, I mentioned earlier that you can't tell what time this movie takes place in, as in what year. That's a problem, because it's aiming for a futuristic aesthetic, but it fails at that. And you have enemies that are kind of treated as if they're some kind of cutting-edge cyborgs, but they don't do much of anything. One guy has like a metal blade that comes out of his hand. It's got to be this big, if anything, and it's like, so what? It's not that big a deal. If it was like fucking Wolverine's claws, then I could see something to talk about. But as it stands, it's just silly. And this bad guy is trying to find this computer chip for reasons that are barely worth going into. It's a mess. And it's a pity, because the original Car, as I said earlier, was not a bad movie. It wasn't a great movie, but it certainly wasn't a bad movie. And this movie is just a tax write-off. That's the only way I could explain this. And I would wish that I were wrong, but I get the feeling I'm not. This went direct to video, as it should, and it feels like someone did this for tax purposes and nothing else. Though I could be wrong. If you agree, disagree, let me know down below. This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. Peace.